Welcome to dkameraTV, today with a hands-on video on the new Olympus Stylus 1. The Olympus Stylus 1 is a premium compact camera, and that shows when looking at the body, because it's styled similar to the OMD series of Micro Four Thirds cameras, particularly the EM5 and the EM10. So the design language alone says this is not your ordinary point and shoot, this is something special. So what's inside the Stylus 1 that makes it so special? Well, for one, there's a 1 by 1.7 inch type CMOS sensor sporting roughly 12 megapixels and supporting ISO values ranging from 100 to 12,800, so that's pretty standard. That doesn't make the camera very special yet. But when we look at the lens, it becomes obvious why this camera looks almost like a DSLR, not like your ordinary compact. It's got a 28 to 300mm equivalent 10.7 times zoom lens, and the really interesting thing about this lens is that it's got a constant f2.8 initial aperture. This means that both at the wide angle and at the telephoto end, the lens is relatively bright and allows, for example, for handheld pictures even in dim light. In order to further support the lens, there is an optical image stabilizer, which gives you a couple of extra stops of shutter speed, so that even in available light, with the zoom extended, you can, for example, take portrait pictures with a shallow depth of field. Apart from the lens, there's a shutter that goes to 1/2000th of a second, which isn't extremely fast. But again, Olympus decided to add another extra feature to the camera, which is a built-in neutral density filter, which gives you an extra 3 stops. So even in bright sunlight on the outside on a sunny day, you can use the lens at f2.8 and the shutter won't cause any problems. The camera takes video as well, 1080 30 frames per second full HD, but unfortunately there are as good as no manual options for video, so this isn't really a camera that lends itself at the advanced videographer. Though there's a nice extra feature in the video mode, you can take high-speed video at 240 frames per second, but at a reduced resolution of 320 by 240 pixels. The continuous shooting mode takes 7 pictures per second, which is relatively fast, and also there's a Wi-Fi module integrated, which means that you can remote control the camera with the Olympus smartphone app, and you can directly transfer your images to your smartphone. Now, as to the body, we already mentioned that it's styled similarly to the OMD EM models. And when we put them next to each other, the Stylus 1 and the EM5, this becomes all the more obvious. The cameras are roughly the same size. They have roughly the same grip. They have the same shape with a viewfinder on top. And also on the rear, we find a huge display on both. We find roughly the same button layout and the same thumb rest. So this design language submits a clear statement, and it says this is a high-end, a premium camera. And in fact, the Olympus Stylus 1 really is unique at this moment. There are high-end compacts that have fast lenses, but usually these lenses are fast at the wide-angle end and relatively slow at the tele end. And also, most of the time, these lenses don't have as high a zoom factor as the Stylus 1. So now, after talking about the technical details of the Stylus 1, let's take a closer look at its body and what it has to offer. The Olympus Stylus 1's body is designed to look like its bigger OMD camera siblings. But it's got its own peculiarities, and that's what we're going to look at now. On the front, the first thing you'll notice is the huge zoom lens, the 10.7 zoom with its bright initial f2.8 aperture. Around the zoom lens there's an additional ring that can be used, for example, to set the camera's aperture. And when used in that configuration, it makes these nice clicks when it's operated. Next to the lens there's a customizable function button, and next to this function button there's a small lever, and when we pull this lever, then the ring around the lens operates without clicks. And this is the position where the ring can be used, for example, to manually focus the lens or to operate the zoom mechanism of the lens. Then, when we look at the other side of the lens, there's a second zoom lever on this side, as well as a little button that pops up, the pop-up flash. So here you've got already two possibilities to operate the lens's zoom mechanism. The lens also comes with a filter thread, and now screwed into the thread is the very clever lens cap, which automatically opens up and closes when the lens is extended or retracted. So let's take a look at what happens when we turn on the camera. The lens pops out, the lens cap opens, and when we retract the lens, then the lens cap closes again by a simple mechanism. On the top we've got the typical armada of buttons and dials, and it looks very similar again to the OMD series of cameras. First of all, here's the on-off button, and when we press this to activate the camera, it lights up in blue. Very nice. There's the shutter button, of course, and around the shutter button there's a third zoom lever. So overall you've got three possibilities on this camera to activate the zoom, and that's really outstanding, and that's something you don't see on every camera. You have this zoom lever here around the shutter button, you have this one on one side of the lens, and then again there's the ring around the lens, which can also be used to activate the zoom. Then on the top of the camera there's the movie recording button. This immediately starts movie recording, and when we take a look at the mode dial, which sports your typical shooting modes, you'll see that there is no video mode on this dial, and that makes sense because the video mode isn't very elaborate. It doesn't give you any manual options. So really all you can do is start recording and stop recording, and that's what this button is there for. And then finally we have this dial, which for example sets the shutter speed or the exposure compensation depending on your shooting mode, and in conjunction with the ring around the lens you can fully manually operate the camera in manual mode. And of course there's a hot shoe for an external flash. On the back of the camera, of course, there's the huge 3-inch display. This is similar to the one on the OMD models, and it can be tilted up and down. And then there's the next similarity, and the one thing that really makes this camera outstanding besides the lens, it's the highly resolving integrated viewfinder, 1.44 million dots, we already mentioned that, and it's the same as on the OMD EM5 and EM10. It's also got the diopter adjustment wheel on this side. Apart from that, here's a thumb rest on the rear, again the same as on the OMD EM5 and EM10. There's a function button, and then your typical set of buttons that you find not only on the pen models, on the OMD models, but also on other compact camera models. Playback menu, the info button that switches the screen display, the OK button, and this 4-way controller that gives access to direct function settings. In terms of connectivity, besides the Wi-Fi module, there isn't really much. Of course, HDMI and USB is there, but for example, no microphone input. As we already mentioned, this is not a videographer's camera. And finally, on the bottom of the camera, let's switch it off first. On the bottom of the camera there's the compartment for the battery and the SD card, as well as the tripod mount. So much for the body of the Olympus Stylus 1. Now that we've taken a closer look at the Stylus 1's body, let's take a tour through its menu system. The menus of the Olympus Stylus 1 are styled similarly to those of other cameras from Olympus, such as its Micro Four Thirds models. When switching on the camera, the first thing we get to see is the preview screen, and as with other Olympus cameras, the info button cycles through the various information overlays that the Stylus 1 has to offer. The menu button takes us directly into the camera's main menu, and this one is again styled similarly to those of other Olympus cameras. There are the main shooting options that can be set. There's a menu that adjusts the playback mode, main camera settings, and of course the very detailed sub-menu, the custom menu, that lets you switch almost any setting that can be switched on this camera. And finally, also in playback mode, the info button cycles through different preview screens. Thanks to the built-in Wi-Fi module, the Olympus Stylus One can be connected to your smartphone or tablet. You can remote control the camera from your smartphone, you can send images to your smartphone, and you can tag them with GPS information. If you'd like to see how the Olympus smartphone app works, then please take a look at a hands-on video of the OMD EM1, because the functionality of the smartphone app and the way that you connect it to the camera is identical with the Stylus One. As already mentioned, the Stylus One is a pretty unique camera at the moment. It's a high-end compact with a long zoom lens and a bright initial aperture, albeit a constant bright initial aperture, and that's something not many cameras have to offer right now. One camera that is roughly comparable to the Stylus One is the Sony RX10, but it's not really a competitor, because it is much larger, much heavier, has a much more elaborate video mode, so the RX10 from Sony is much more aimed at the videographer, which the Stylus One isn't. And also, the RX10 has a much higher price tag than the Stylus One. It costs almost twice as much. So there's really no consumer advice that we can give on the Stylus One, because it is such a unique camera at the moment. That was our hands-on video of the Olympus Stylus One. We hope you enjoyed it. As always, you can find a full review of the camera on dkameraTV. And if you're not already a fan of a YouTube video channel, then we are happy about every new subscription. Thanks for watching.